What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here, back to review episode 9 of the Orville, an episode called Cupid's Dagger. I apologize for the tardiness on this video, but I was waylaid. I was unavoidably detained doing a review of 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, a movie that I strongly recommend everybody hunt down. But we're not here to discuss character-driven dramas. We're here to discuss comedy and sci-fi, and I thought episode 9 was an absolutely hysterical rebound from last week's kind of stiff episode. I enjoyed episode 8, but it definitely wasn't one of those home run episodes that's going to get a lot of fans flocking to the show. But as I mentioned in my previous Star Trek video, Season 2 of the Orville has received the green light. So while there are only 4 episodes to go in the Orville this season, we have Season 2 to look forward to next year. Something tells me as strong as some of the episodes have been this season. I think we can all agree that it's been up and down at time, and even individual episodes can be a little inconsistent within themselves, but it seems like the show just keeps getting better and better. But even if it stays right where it is in terms of its quality, I have no problem with that because I laughed like hell watching this episode. Even before the plot of the episode got underway, I was just smiling from ear to ear. Kelly Grayson, she's at a karaoke party singing Journey's Any Way You Want, and she's pretty damn good. I mean, she's got some lungs. And what was great about it, though, is while she's performing and swaying back and forth and doing her thing, we see a shot of Ed Mercer looking at her, and he's smiling at her with such love and adoration. And at the time, I was thinking, wow, like he really is falling for her again. Little did I realize it was actually a very brief taste of their happiness before it was going to be absolutely ripped to smithereens in the latter part of the episode. But before we get to that, I think it was a crime against nature to deprive us, the audience, of Bortus, who was about to sing My Heart Will Go On from Titanic. I'm not necessarily the world's biggest fan of Titanic, but I could lay aside all my grievances in order to listen to Bortus do his version of Celine Dion. But sadly, we didn't get it this episode, but maybe we'll get it before the end of the season. But the main thrust of this episode is the fact that these two races, the Bruidians and Navarians, are fighting over who has the rights to their planet. These are 2 races that absolutely despise one another, and the Orville's been called in to try to find a diplomatic solution. And part of that diplomatic solution is an archaeological study to figure out which race has the prior claim on the planet. And it just so happens that this archaeologist that they call in for the gig is Darulio, played by the great Rob Lowe. For people who don't remember or did not see the first episode, Darulio was the beautiful blue-skinned alien that was responsible for breaking up Ed Mercer and Kelly Grayson's marriage in the first place. He didn't even speak, I don't think, in his first appearance. All we saw was this like orgasmic blue jelly squirt out of his forehead when he was caught in the act of coitus. But his arrival on the Orville just creates all kinds of chaos, initially just because of Ed's jealousy, but as we come to learn, his race once a year goes through this version of heat, where when they're in heat, they basically have this pheromone on their skin, and if they come in contact with anyone, they are overwhelmed with lust and love and affection, and they're basically going to hop into bed with anyone they come in contact with. His particular species doesn't think that's that big of a deal, and his culture is considered very rude to turn down sex. It sounds like they have very few hang-ups where he comes from. The problem is right at the moment when Kelly and Mercer are needed most to find a diplomatic solution between these 2 warring races, they basically are locked in this crazy love triangle, both trying to bang Darulio. I thought this was going to lead to some elaborate threesome, basically, whereupon at the end they would be reunited. Sadly, that did not go down, but we do get some very humorous bits where Mercer and Grayson are competing for Darulio's affections, and Seth MacFarlane, he's awkward and fumbling over his words. He basically has like a teenage crush on Darulio. Even more humorous, though, than the love triangle that's taking place at the core of the story is the fact that Dr. Finn and Yaphet finally get it on in this episode, because Darulio accidentally walks through Yaphet, and a part of him gets stuck to him, and so his pheromones then get transferred to Dr. Claire Finn. And we see this initial cute scene where Yaphet's playing guitar for her and serenading her and like, I want to be your boyfriend. And I mean, it's absolutely hysterical. But after they touch, she ends up getting herself all dolled up and coming to his room in like full-blown seductress mode. And we get this great stuff where we see how Yaphet, when he wants to stretch out, he basically turns into a pool of ooze in this square tub. But when it's time to get amorous, he like stretches up and is able to kiss. But then we get this beautiful shot where Alara Katan is looking for Dr. Finn, comes into their quarters, and sees that Yaphet is basically like wrapped up around her. If for a horror movie, he basically would be consuming her or eating her. It's almost like he's the Blob, but instead of digesting her, they're just writhing in sexual ecstasy. And I just started howling with laughter. It's some of the most ridiculous shit I've ever seen in a sci-fi show. It's the kind of scene that we will never see in a million years on Discovery. Discovery is a show I enjoy, but as we all know, Discovery leans a tad to the serious side. I mean, if anyone on that show ever even cracks a smile, it about makes the show fall into a million pieces. It's just a very rigid structure, whereas Orville is very light and playful, and you can have a scene where Yaphet and Dr. Claire Finn get it on, and it doesn't break the rhythm of the show, it only enhances it. But even with all this chaos going on, and with two species and their fleets arriving about to go to war, this episode stays very light. I mean, there's a great recurring gag with this giant big-brained alien who's constantly on the elevator every time that Grayson and Mercer are. And yeah, I just was basically either lightly chuckling or laughing outright throughout this entire episode. And of course, all ends well. Drulio steps in and basically makes the two species fall in love with each other. And as his archaeological dig proves, these two races, or these two species, come from a common ancestor, and then have to learn to share the planet in a harmonious fashion. The episode even ends on a little bit of an open-ended kind of cliffhanger, because Kelly asked Drulio if he was in heat the first time that they got it on, and he basically gives her a very strong maybe. So I feel like that at least leaves the cage door open to the fact that maybe she wasn't completely in control of herself the first time she succumbed to his blue allure, and we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens. I imagine maybe this is one of those situations where Mercer and Grayson will always be teasing or flirting with getting back together, but it'll never actually happen. Many TV shows have relied upon that formula. But speaking of formulas, the teaser for the next episode looks like it's breaking all the formulas we've seen so far, with an episode that's quite different from anything that's come before. It looks almost like the Orville has encountered some giant cosmic level entity out in space, and the Orville's under attack or it's being invaded, almost like it's being turned into a haunted house. It looks absolutely killer. And some of my favorite old school Star Trek episodes are when basically Kirk is forced to match wits with or make some huge giant bluff against some creature with power that is far beyond the capacity of the Enterprise. And I always feel like those episodes are the most interesting, but I'm very curious to see what they come up with just on the basis of that small teaser. In any case, I hope you all have enjoyed my recap and review. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider giving my channel a subscribe, leave a comment in the comments below, or give me a shout on Twitter @Colbrax. Hope everyone has an amazing weekend, and I'll talk to y'all later.